I couldn't have felt any older watching The Last Dance. As we know, I snuck in there in episode 10 with my hair, my flowing mane. And some people, like Costas.
Looks the same.
David Aldridge, the same thing.
DA looks the same.
From The Athletic, my friend David Aldridge, DA here on the Rich Eisen Show, haven't aged a day. DA, not a day.
Richard, it's good to know that your TV isn't working very well. You need to work on the contrast.
Standard definition? The definition is standard? So what you're saying? How have you been? Are you well? Everybody in your family well, I hope, David? I'm knocking on wood here.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no COVID stuff. There's some other stuff, but that's, it is what it is. Everybody's dealing with something, so. But nothing with regard to the virus. So that's a blessing with older relatives, especially. And just trying to, navigate these uncharted waters.
No, I understand. I understand. Again, and I came on the air and I said, I hope everybody seeking justice and peace finds it immediately. And I'm assuming that's what you are referring to. And it's just, I guess for the purposes of this show, it's just another reason why, I think people seek out what maybe we're going to be talking about in sports world. And The Last Dance was so successful to just lose ourselves and forget about what's going on outside, David.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard, and it's part of. I wrote today that it's very difficult right now for me to be, all about sports. Sports is important, and
right.
We need to get back and open everything up. It's very difficult to have that kind of discussion right now. With everything that's going on in our country, and I understand. Believe me, and I'm sure you do too, Rich. We all understand that sports are important to people. They're important to us. They're how we've made a living. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
I get it. I understand. I've made a living covering sports for a very long time, as have you, and we get that. And we know that it's important to a lot of people. It's important to us, right? I mean, it is. I want sports to come back, certainly, and I want the games to come back because I do think it will help. It will help a lot of people. But I know that it's also, there are people who aren't thinking about that right now, and I would just like people to be cognizant of that, to know that entertainment and distraction and all those things are not things that everybody has in the front of their consciousness right now.
Right.
So
I understand.
If we can all just understand that I think it'll go a long way toward a lot of different things.
Well, then I'm particularly thankful of you taking the time today to call in.
Sure.
David.
No, I wasn't addressing that at you at all.
No, I didn't take it. I didn't take it at that, but I just wanted to at least acknowledge and respect what you've just said, with at least me saying that.
I appreciate that. I do, very, very much so, because it's hard. It's hard right now.
No question about it, David. And again, that's why I'm appreciative of you calling in, David Aldridge of The Athletic here on the Rich Eisen Show. Where do things stand, best you can tell? Because we did hear from the NHL this week, a format.
Yeah.
Man, you're seeing baseball having all sorts of collective bargaining arguments, it seems, that's bubbling to the surface. Where are things with the NBA, its union, and an announcement or for readiness to play again?
I think the NBA union situation is much better in terms of cooperation with the league than the baseball unions is. I mean, that just seems to be spiraling, out of control in baseball. The basketball union is working pretty much hand in glove with the league. I mean, there is literally a joint committee that's trying to come up with different scenarios. Now, they're not anywhere near finished yet, but they are working together, The union has basically signed off on, Orlando as the site of a playoff, tournaments. However, whatever format that ultimately becomes, the basketball players put money into escrow for the use of the owners in case the season were to be canceled for whatever reason. So the owners have some sort of financial certainty in terms of their losses being, stanched somewhat, right, for the rest of this year. So there, and the biggest thing, Rich, is that both the players and the owners both want to play. They both want this to continue. They want the season to continue, and they want it to conclude with postseason play and having a champion. So my experience with the league over many years is that when the players and the owners both want something to happen, it tends to happen. And so I think that's why, there's a lot of optimism, bordering almost on certainty, that there's going to be, a resumption of play at some point, probably in July, that would last into September at some point before it concludes with the finals.
Any idea if it's a two hub city, all one hub city, anything of that nature?
I think right now, I know there's been talk, about Houston as a possibility, but I know that Bob Iger's been pushing very hard for Orlando and Disney World. And again, I think the players in the main, you're not going to get 100% support on anything, but I think in the main, most players, most of their agents, there are some agents still holding out for Vegas for different reasons, but most people are all pointing in the direction of Orlando. Now, the shape of that will be determined by how many teams are in the tournament, how many regular season games you play. Do you play all those regular season games in Orlando? Do you play them off-site somewhere else? Do you play them in another city? That's maybe where another city comes in. But I think the coalition behind having your playoff tournament with however many teams qualify in Orlando has pretty much been signed off on by all the important parties involved.
Well, I'll tell you this: if I'm a player with a family and I got kids, and I want to bring them into the, to use the phrase, bubble community, Disney World wouldn't be a bad place if everybody can be. Let me know that they're safe.
Yeah.
The kids can do that while Dad tries to win the Larry O'Brien Trophy. I mean, that would be something I'd be more inclined to attempt.
Yeah, and that's part of it. That is definitely part of it. Is that there's just more for the families to do, for the kids to do, even for the players to do on off days. I mean, you can go play golf in Orlando on an off day.
True.
On one of their 87 golf courses that they have
Right.
down there.
Right.
Whereas Vegas, it's not that Orlando isn't hot in the summer. It is. It's not that it's not humid. It is, but it's not 107 like it was yesterday in Las Vegas. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You can't go outside in Las Vegas in the summertime. You just can't. There's not much to do that doesn't give you, heat stroke. So, you've got to, so that's where I think a lot of people are leaning more towards Orlando than Vegas. Even though Vegas, in some ways, probably has more experience and would be easier to control a hotel, or at least a chain of hotels. If you had the Wynn and Encore, if you had Mandalay Bay and all, you could probably control that a little bit more, but there would be far less for families to do.
David Aldridge, athletic senior NBA writer here on the Rich Eisen Show. And so what about the format are you hearing? Because, you already hear somebody like Steve Kerr saying he's figuratively on a beach right now, like they're done. And then you hear Damian Lillard, and I think he's every right to say, I don't want to leave my family and my home or even bring them across the country if I'm just playing out a string. Like, you want to put me in a tournament where I've got a shot, where I can do my Dame time stuff, then I'm in. Where does that stand right now, do you think, David?
I think if you to kind of generalize in terms of where they are, I just think more people want more games, right? So my guess is you will have some sort of tournament type of playoff format where, whether it's one team, or whether it's two teams per conference and you wind up with 20 teams in this thing, or you come up with some way where everybody's involved. Now, I've been asking a lot of people the last few days, well, Golden State's already been eliminated from the playoffs. How do you uneliminate them? You know what I mean?
Especially, by the way, the most dangerous 15 seed in the history of 15 seeds if Klay Thompson's healthy, right?
So you're, and I get it. Look, I know you want compelling programming. You want Steph in the playoffs. I get it. You want Zion in the playoffs. I get it. You know what I mean? But
sure.
And there's a basic fairness here. It's not like you played 5 games and then you shut the season down. You played 65. Okay, like you played most of the season. You played 80+% of the season already. So there has to be some sort of fairness with regard to that percentage of the season meaning something. It doesn't have to mean everything, but it should mean something, right? I think the argument of the Milwaukees of the world is somewhat compelling. We did play a lot of the season.
Yes.
And we were really good for most of that. And
yes.
we should be able to take some of that advantage to the postseason. And I tend to agree with that. So I think it will be. I don't think it'll be all 30. I just can't see that. I don't know how you can, other than them playing those 5 to 7 games at the to get to because they have obligations to their local TV markets and their local TV partners. So everybody's got to get to 70 games so that they don't lose more money. You'll do that, right? So all 30 teams will play to get to 70. But how you then say that it's okay for Cleveland and New York and Golden State to compete for a championship this year, that just doesn't seem right to me.
David Aldridge here on the Rich Eisen Show. In the few minutes I have left with you, I've been conducting Last Dance exit interviews for a lot of people who now that it's all in the books. Did you learn anything watching it?
I can't say I learned anything, and that's just because I'm old and I was there
yes.
for most of it.
Right.
So I saw most of it. I mean, you forget some things. That's a different point.
Sure.
Like I just forgot that Rodman just went to Vegas in the middle of the season.
That's
I
right.
forgot about that. I didn't remember that. I just forgot that he, in the middle of the finals, just left to go do a WCW event. That. And it just kind of reemphasized to me, I think a phenomenal job Phil Jackson did coaching that team those 3 years, because it could have gone off the rails 100 times, So you forget things that happen. And what I've told people, Rich, is that I'm just glad that younger viewers and younger people who like the NBA now, fans under 40 who weren't there or they were infants when that was going on, I have no recollection of it. I'm just glad that they have some sense, not only of how good Michael Jordan was, because he was that good. I mean, you remember, he was that good. I mean, we're not making that up. He was one of the greatest players, if not the greatest player of all time, right? But how competitive and dynamic the league was in terms of the rivalries and the passions and the hatreds and all of those things that those teams had for one another, and how compelling that made the games. And so it wasn't. And what I'm trying to explain to people is that 85, 84 could be a hell of a game if they really hate each other and every possession is a battle. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
So I mean, it's not just about shot efficiency all the time. The part of why some of us older people really came to love the NBA was because the competition was so visceral and real. And that made it compelling, even though they didn't score 115 points every game. It was still really fun to watch those games back in those years. So
absolutely, it was.
I'm glad that people get to see that.
Me too, and I do remember part of the conversation being at the time, and this is legit. And now you look back, you're like, what the hell were people even saying? Like, yeah, but the Western Conference was so weak when Jordan would just win all the time, right? And then you saw, and then you also just saw too the people who he beat. He beats Magic, he beats Malone and Stockton, he beats Barkley and Phoenix, he beats Reggie Miller on the way, and he beats Patrick Ewing every single damn time, and then he beats Gary Payton and the Sonics when they were terrific, and then you see. The Pistons, who he couldn't beat to start, then he vanquishes them on the way. Right. And the number of people who every single time I'd sit there, I'm like, you know what? Every fan base is going to get theirs. During this 10-part documentary, every fan base is going to get theirs. And then they showed the trivia, the number of 60-win teams Jordan and the Phil Jackson and Pippen Bulls eliminated. Numbers 7 of them. That's an absurd number. An absurd number. Oh, by the way, and Shaquille O'Neal in Orlando he wound up taken out too.
Correct.
You know, it really was just remarkable in that regard. But last one for you here. Was there a story you told Jason Hare, the director, that you thought, man, that would have been great if they aired that we didn't see, that hit the cutting room floor? You were in the middle of so many great stories, from the Fugazi, I guess, slight that that Jordan created. His name escapes me. The kid from the Washington, Bradford Smith.
Bradford Smith.
Just you were telling all these great stories. Was there one that you told that, man, I wish it made the final cut?
Yeah, I'm you know what? A couple of people have asked me that, Rich, and honestly, I was surprised. They used me way more than I thought they would.
You're a great storyteller, David. You're a great storyteller.
I really didn't think. Well, here's the thing. Like I was one of the latter interviews that they did, and that's because of a lot of reasons. We just couldn't find a time that worked for either of us for a long time. And so I thought, and I'm not being like self-aggrandizing about this at all, Rich. I thought, okay, they've shot, they've done a lot of interviews. They've got all the tape that they're probably going to have, that they're going to, but there'll be, and this being in television, television, you have to cover it with something, right? Like you can't just show blank screen. You have to cover it with something. So I thought, okay, I'll be the guy that fills in the gaps, the stuff the games they don't have tape of for whatever reason.
Nice.
You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
So I'll be that guy, and I'll be in like 2 or 3 times over the course, and you know what? I'd be fine with that. I was kind of expecting that, so I was pleasantly surprised they used most of my stories.
Well, David, if you were a role player or a bench player for The Last Dance, you were Vinny the Microwave Johnson, man. You were. I mean, you heated it up.
Or Steve Kerr, one of those guys. I actually
That's
contributed
great.
more than I thought I was. So it was a pleasant surprise. I was happy with it. I can't complain about it.
That was great. I mean, really, the whole thing from soup to nuts was wonderful. And at least what they did use of you didn't wind up on an iPad being handed to Jordan because you didn't want to be one of those people in The Last Dance.
No, you didn't want to get the mocking laughter and the glow.
That's the last thing you wanted in The Last Dance, is to be on one of those iPads that Jason Hare handed Jordan, saying, "Here, check this one out."
Exactly.
David, thanks for the time.
You know what that means.
Yeah, you didn't want to be that. Thanks. Yeah. Appreciate the time, David.
It's a pleasure. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Right back at you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's David Aldridge. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.